Cory, great to have you with us. I'd love to know, and I'm sure our listeners are going to love to know a lot more about your background. So let's just start with you telling us an interesting story of the early Cory.
Absolutely. So I thought I was going to be a famous rapper. And in college in 1997, I had a tentative deal. I had a radio show. I used to freestyle on this show every single Saturday. It was called Fat Beats. I had a couple singles that made local radio. And I really thought I was going to become a famous rapper. And so after my first year of college, it wasn't for me. I dropped out of college to become a computer software tester. And this was in 1997 for Rand McNally. I helped test the software that would ultimately become the first ever Atlas software. And some of that turned into what became some of the first GPS software. And so, I've kind of been in software on and off for most of my adult life, but never quite made it as a famous rapper. Ended up just getting a couple of guns pulled on me and a little bit of press on the Source magazine. And I ended up going into about a 15, almost 20-year restaurant career before I got back into technology.
Wow. So basically, rapper to software guy. All right. So that's not the most usual transition that we see or hear about, right? So I know that you come from the restaurant hospitality gig, and I was hoping that you could, just tell us a little bit more about that and how that shaped some of your views on service.
Absolutely. So I'm still the guy, although I waited my last table 7 years ago. If I'm anywhere, I'm always wanting to fill everybody's water to the top. I used to do that because every time you fill someone's water, they say thank you, and every thank you, translates to something on the back end. I still have close relationships that I used to be a regular waiter to 7 years later, right? So you really can build real rapport. But I think for me, the biggest part of it was, first of all, anticipating needs. I think learning how to anticipate needs on the fly can be translated into any industry. And I think it served me really well in executive leadership and entrepreneurship. Another one is you're always on stage, right? And I think that was a big one as well, because now, if I'm delivering a keynote or if I'm pitching, to a large group or demo day or whatever it might be, I'm used to it. Right. I've had parties of 1,000 with celebrities in it when I was a waiter that I had to speak to the whole room. So now going and speaking to an audience of a couple thousand in an auditorium, it's not nearly as daunting as it probably would have been. And then, from the other side, and you said, like, what did I get out of the service? I was fortunate to work at the higher end where every piece of silver had to be polished. Every piece of crystal glassware had to be spotless. There was no margin for error. Your outfit was pressed and starched every day. It was absolutely clean. And so, coming into, again, software, entrepreneurship, tech, it really gave me this dichotomy where I know how to be a perfectionist and deliver perfection, but I've also been able to kind of translate the doing it all on the fly to being able to iterate and pivot, right? And being able to kind of be fluid in different situations and with different types of people. So, anymore, I'm quite famous for saying all the time, although I didn't come up with it, that perfection is the enemy of progress. But I do think coming from an industry where perfection was almost a requisite really helped me to kind of perform at the highest level.
Wow, that's so interesting. And beyond the story of what you've learned in service, it sounds like you're the kind of person who's super attentive to the details along the journey, and then using those details to prepare you for your next step. So it sounds like there's just a constant game of learning. This definitely wasn't something that I was planning on asking you, but can you just tell us a little bit about this ability of yours to look at the detail and pick up the valuable stuff and use it along the journey all the time? Is this a quality that you've always known you've had?
Yeah, I think, well, always is a strong word, but I think I'll harken back to my service days. When I first started waiting tables, it was, when I thought I was going to be a rapper, I also thought that, to be a rapper, you had to be a gangster and a drug dealer. And so I went through some rough stuff in my very late teens and earliest 20s. And so coming out of some of that, I mean, I was sleeping in parks and in parking garages for some time and not eating every day, right? Didn't have a place to stay once my gang banging, drug dealing rapper thing didn't work out. I found myself kind of stranded. So to get off the streets, I became the best dishwasher I could, and then the best busboy, and then waiter and bartender. And I say all that to say this: I learned wine very quickly. I became certified as a sommelier within just a few months because I realized I had access and entree to taste a bunch of wines, listen to a bunch of sommeliers, sell a bunch of wine, do a lot of reading. This is still, the internet was still very early at this time. So a lot of this was like going out and getting magazines and books and, literally calling people cold and, just asking them everything I could about wine. And so I think from that early age, almost out of necessity, I was able to go from making $0 a year, literally, to make about 150,000 a year in a very short span by learning this knowledge, right? And just by continuing to improve. And I do think that happened at the right formative years of my life, earliest adulthood, or, really just trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, and knowing that I never wanted to be starving and on the streets again, right? And so now that's translated, now that there's the internet, which is effectively the Akashic record, and now that there's every bit of knowledge, that's ever been known by man is accessible in 1 second for free at our fingertips. So I translated that into entrepreneurship. I learned everything about starting a company and then starting a company, right? Bootstrapping it to market, raising 6 figures in capital, all of that by watching YouTube and reading books for about a month, right? Similarly, I'm now known as one of the Web3 and metaverse experts in the world. And I think I can probably justify that at this point. But again, about a year ago, I knew a little bit about different blockchains and smart contracts and protocols, but I went all in, again, YouTube and books, and I learned so much about the emerging new internet, right? This Web 3.0 in very short order. And so I think I've always, perpetually just gone all in on something, learned as much as I could, and then kind of let experience turn me into that subject matter expert.
Wow. Super interesting learning about the early Cory. So let's talk about the Cory of today. So you mentioned Web3, and you mentioned, doing all what you can to learn about it and to get prepared for this next wave. Let's start with the uber basics, the building blocks, right? Talk to us about what Web3 is and what it isn't.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great question. And some of your audience, I think, already knows this. So I'll try not to dumb it down too much. But very simply, there was no Web 1.0, right? That was just the internet. And it was back when our internet connections were modems, and they would sing to us and it would knock people off the phone, right? And it was all websites. Right? You can think of it as .com or websites, but the internet as such was a disparate just sites, right? And a business would have their website. That was Web 1.0. And people say that, kind of the emergent new internet, which is now being heralded as Web 2, was when you got this rich media. But more so than that, for me, it was once you started to get social media, right? Because now businesses didn't need a website as much as they needed a social media presence. And so I often say Web 1 was .com, Web 2 was @brand. Right. So rather than a website, it became a social media presence, building community, turning people into, personal brands. That all was a byproduct of Web 2. And it's interesting because no one ever thought they were in Web 1. Similarly, no one ever really thought they were in Web 2. They're just like, wow, the internet got bigger and cooler, right? That's all that happened. The internet got bigger and cooler, easier to use. And the same thing's happening with Web 3. Now we're starting to be able to delineate kind of different things, and so now we're calling them Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. That said, Web 3.0 is going to all be built on the blockchain. So all this kind of immutable ledger, all of this kind of data privacy being at the heart of things, interoperability being at the heart of things. Web 3.0 will comprise of NFTs and crypto, although it doesn't require any of that. It will have a metaverse component, some mixed and augmented reality components, but it's not only that. Really, when I talk about Web 3.0, people won't know that they're on Web 3.0. They'll just have that aha moment and epiphany again, where it's like, wow, the internet just got way bigger and cooler again, right? And for the younger people that don't remember the modems and right the days of AOL and chat rooms, it's like all they're going to think is that this future that they've all been imagining for a few years now, the younger generation, is just going to be coming into fruition. And there are better than photorealistic graphics and platforms out there now. There is anything from an experiential standpoint. And it's all kind of unfolding right now.
Right. Now, you mentioned a whole bunch of terms, and I'm hoping that there's just probably one or two terms inside that we're going to probably unpack a little bit more. We probably can't do all of it and get to know everything perfectly on a short call, but what I'm curious to understand is today's CIO, all right, of an average, when I say average, I'm referring to an established brand, the CIO of a fairly major company. What are some of the things that they should be thinking of when it comes to preparing for this thing called Web 3 or Web 3.0?
Yeah, so I think what needs to be understood about Web 3 is that it's all about the individual, right? So it's really a way for a company to connect more with their prospects or their existing clientele on a personal basis. It will be somewhat immersive. It will be more of a choose your own adventure, right? People are going to be able to really discern what they want to be fed digitally. So the CIO of a global company, billion-dollar company, emerging disruptive company needs to really understand that if they don't know how to connect with their customer and deliver a superior experience, that they're going to lose. I think every major company is already building their new infrastructure on the blockchain, so I think that's probably somewhat of a given. And I think other companies are going all in for the metaverse. I think that's probably short-sighted as well. People, you hear metaverse and they think virtual reality or like video games for adults, and that's not what it's all about. But to take a step back and even zoom out a little bit more, I think that every CIO right now, especially of a major company, needs to really understand what an NFT is. Because I can tell you what an NFT isn't, right? Conceptually and big picture, it's not a cartoon of some silly animal that was worth $100 one day and 100,000 the next. That's not an NFT, although it is an NFT. But an NFT is simply a digital asset that is worth something, typically that is going to be a one of one. And I use some examples that I think a lot of people hadn't thought of yet, like your medical records. Your medical records will become an NFT, right? They will live on a blockchain that will be accessible via smart contract only by the right people at the right time. And you as an individual will have custody of your medical records. That's an NFT, right? Your title to your car or house, right? These should absolutely be safe and secure, right? There's so many things that can go wrong when it's just a piece of paper, your diploma, your educational records, right? And the list goes on and on. But I think once companies conceptually understand that NFTs will be the foundation of the entire new emerging internet, that's kind of the beginning of understanding how to leverage this. And then I think on the other side, I think everybody, including these CIOs that you're referencing, should really understand that Web 3.0 isn't going to be its own thing, right? If we tried to launch a new internet on the blockchain with protocols and all these things right now, no one would use it, right? So Web 3 is absolutely and fundamentally going to be fed still by all the social media and the data that it's collected over the last decade or more. It's still going to be fed with all of the websites and all of the millions and billions of data points that they individually have amassed over these 20 plus years, right? So I think if a CIO understands that they need to really get blockchain and NFTs just on a tech level, right? Just on a pure what they are and aren't level, and then understand that they absolutely can, should, and will need to be leveraging everything that they've been doing, digitally and online since the day that they got online, is probably a pretty solid foundation.
Wow, I love the examples that you chose to use. I love that you mentioned medical records, a title deed, and stuff like that. Pretty much any official document that would typically be notarized. So if we rewind humanity by a few decades, anything that would have been seen as an official title or something of ownership could, in fact, going forward, be more securely held or transmitted because of the whole, method of NFTs. Now, surely, based on that one premise, businesses should be rethinking some of their workflows in terms of, the new opportunities to allocate authorizations electronically in a way that is so safe and secure. It isn't just like you said about, the marketing department thinking about how we can use NFTs to get attention. It could be a very important part of a company workflow, even if it's a government department or whether it's a private company. It could actually force or it could require that we reinvent some workflows, but really for the better of how we operate as a business or as a government, right? Now, if we start thinking about NFTs in that way, who would be the group of people out there that you would implore and that you would call on to start learning about NFTs and start understanding their application? Who would you say right now, guys, you've got to be listening to this?
Well, I think I can't answer that competently by referencing a company or a person. What I will say is probably a little bit more abstract, but I would stay away from anybody that is trying to build anything in a silo. This next internet will be purely collaborative, purely open, and so many people are building wrong right now. Really, I mean, I'd say more than 80% of people that think they're building into Web3 right now are building into a silo. They're really just building, a kind of cooler version of something that really could have existed, for way before Web3, put it that way. But what I would encourage people to do, go on YouTube, right? Find the people that resonate with you that aren't pushing a product. This is not the time to be sold on anything. This is the time to be informed and educated. And there are so many amazing resources on YouTube. What I would say is that in and of itself, and I call that Google University, but that could be in and of itself a really solid foundation for someone to then go and read a few books. There are some amazing books out right now. That I think are great supplementally once you get a foundation. So I think, finding on YouTube, here's what I would really encourage people to look at on the videos themselves. Make sure that they're no more than 6 months old. This industry is so nascent, it changes so often that you can watch an amazingly intelligent video from a year ago, walk away and think you know a whole lot and be wrong about all of it now. So I think, the timeliness of these videos is hugely relevant. I would also shy away from anything that doesn't have at least a couple thousand likes and positive comments on it, right? There might be some people that are putting out something new that seems like they're very intelligent, but if it's not being received by the community, that's a red flag, right? There's too much of a tight-knit community going on here. We all flock to the good stuff. So I think if it's new and if it's got a lot of data points and social proof behind it, and they're not actively trying to sell you something in a silo, then just go for the personality types that resonate with you. I don't like being yelled at, and I don't think he's even specifically doing this, but I don't like being yelled at, so I wouldn't watch Gary Vee, right? He loves to yell at the camera and yell at the audience and tell them all how lazy and stupid they are, and I don't play that. So I don't tune into those videos, right? I prefer, maybe someone that's a college professor or that's started a $1 billion company in this space, or with a little bit more laid back energy. So I say all that to say this: on YouTube, find the people whose energy resonates with you, right? If you don't like to be yelled at either, it can be the best, most intelligent video ever, but about 10 seconds in, you're going to shut down. So find the people that resonate with you, that are most recent and relevant, that have some social proof. From there, you'll have the foundation to read a book or two. And from there, then I think you'll know enough to find the right people to either talk to, hire as a consultant or as an employee or anything like that. And shameless plug, you can always just follow me on LinkedIn. All I do on anymore is talk about Web3 and all of these things. That's really where I try to let anything I've learned out into the wild.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm sure you're going to pick up a few follows on that. Not that you need them. So on that, Cory, so there's a few things that you said that I think are just very, very, very insightful. And I think that one of the issues that we run into is that there's this imposter syndrome on the subject of NFTs, Web3, and all of metaverse. All of these concepts produce a very us and them feeling, because a lot of people feel outside of that inner core, that inner community that you mentioned earlier. So you've given great advice on how to start, perhaps becoming more knowledgeable. But how would you respond to the concept that this is a very tight-knit community. I don't have a place there. I don't know enough. There's just all these unknown words and terms. How do you respond to an average person who's going through those battles right now, and they shy away from the idea of learning more?
So I think that's a powerful question and a powerful conversation. But in contrast to most other industries and most other niches, this is an absolutely open community. All of us started as novices at some point, probably in the very not distant future, right? This is so new. So rather than looking down on people because they don't know what some of these terminologies mean or haven't heard of some of the different chains or ecosystems, we embrace that, right? So there are some people that like to call people that don't know anything about it noobs, and it's kind of a little bit of like, you're a freshman and we're gonna roast you a little bit. But for the most part, it's an incredibly welcoming, incredibly understanding community. And people can tell right away where you're kind of at in your journey, right? It's everything from the way you present yourself and your verbiage. And so people understand, when someone's a little bit newer, doesn't understand things, and people go out of their way just to support and help you. So I would say to anybody that's resisting because they think that it's kind of this clique, it's not a clique. There are people in this world that love and hate absolutely everything under the sun, and we still come together because we all believe in community and collaboration. We all believe in, technology as being the future. We all believe in this new emerging internet that will happen, right? I think at this point, there's zero doubt in my mind that we're already well underway. So it's kind of, there's always early adopters. If people are a little apprehensive, there's no reason that you can't sit on the sidelines for a bit unless you're $1 billion brand, in which case don't lose your market share and don't get left behind, right? But I'd say everybody's incredibly welcome. This industry is so supportive of, female founders and thought leaders and people of all different creeds and colors and backgrounds. I've never seen anything like it, to be candid. So, I'd say for some people, just rip off the Band-Aid, right? Just jump in the pool, right? The people are nice in here. Nobody is going to be judged for their lack of competence in the field. The only thing I'd say is, all the rumors are true. There are a lot of people trying to scam in this industry. There are a lot of rug pulls. There are a lot of people that hide behind anonymity. So not everybody's your friend, right? So just because everybody's friendly doesn't mean you need to trust, people. Don't give your wallet information away. Don't throw money in, situations that you haven't done research on. And legally, I'm supposed to say that I'm not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice. But for the most part, just jump in. If you get bad vibes from somebody, block and keep moving, right? What do you say in boxing? Duck and sway. But at the same time, this is nothing but inclusive. This is nothing but positivity. And there's it's so nascent, right? In a year, it might be harder to join the community as someone that doesn't know what they're talking about, because it's like, bro, this has been around for years. But right now, it's still so new where people love to be supportive.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And you mentioned some of the crooks, so to speak. Um, so on that, what advice would you have for someone whose manager, for example, cautions them against getting too involved, or says that those are the crazies, that's never going to materialize. I don't want you wasting your time on that. How do you coach that person to handle their manager better?
So I don't know if this is going to come across the right or the wrong way, but I would say that's the moment that that person that experiences that needs to start looking for another job. My assessment is any manager that tells someone how to live their life outside of work, off the clock, how to manage their funds, um, that's the wrong environment. That's the wrong professionalism. Frankly, I think that's illegal in a lot of places. And on the one
No, no, no.
hand,
Just so that I can clear up the question. So in the ordinary course of that person's work, so I'm pretty sure a lot of your response would still apply. So I'm curious to hear. But just to make sure that the question I say it properly, like what advice would you have for someone who feels that in their job, like let's just say they're part of a company where they could, or they should start thinking about how they could be using NFTs to better manage some of their workflows or make it more streamlined, but they're not given that latitude because they have a manager who feels like they're just a bunch of crazies. Like, how do you get around that?
so this is going to sound a little bit more cavalier then, and I'm very glad that you clarified the question, but my answer remains the same. Right now, I do want to say I understand there's some people around the world, maybe even some people listening to this, that don't have the luxury of just leaving a job. Um, Although the global job market is hot right now, I can here's what I'll say. Actually, I'm gonna double down on this. I'm gonna make an even bolder statement. Every company and industry in Web3 is hiring right now. There are so many jobs in Web3, and for the most part, they all pay better than their Web2 counterparts. So if someone is forward thinking enough to understand that in their job, in their company, in their industry, NFTs, blockchain, these things need to be rolled out, and they have a manager going, no, that's for the crazies, don't do it. Um, if possible, it's probably time to learn a little bit more about Web3, and then find the Web3 equivalent of that job where they're going to embrace the future, right? Because I'll give a quick example. If someone were a salesperson selling something in the late 80s, right, and they came to a company and said, there's this new thing called the internet, and we need to put our products on the internet so that we can sell 10,000 times more at twice the profit margin, and we can make millions of dollars. And that company said, you know what, no, we're just going to keep selling things on the shelf at our brick and mortar location. That company's out of business in a few years, right? As soon as the internet gets bigger. So it's the same thing, right? And no one wanted to be at the phone company that wanted to keep the rotary phones. Once people, right, it's just this whole, that's antiquated, and I'm certain of that. So I think, they'd have two options, in my opinion, an assessment. One would be explain to their manager why this isn't for the crazies, and why companies like Nike and Starbucks are, every of the biggest company in the world is embracing this right now. Microsoft, and I know that's your world. Microsoft has fully embraced blockchain, NFTs, right, all of these things. And so if a company doesn't want to go the route of Google, Microsoft, Nike, Amazon, Red Bull, right, then they're not going to be around for long. And so that person's going to need to find a new job sooner than later anyway.
Right. Right. So that's great. So you mentioned a whole bunch of mainstream organizations, super successful organizations, embracing Web3 and doing cool stuff with it. Out of all of those examples, maybe if you could choose one and just talk us through what that company is doing with Web3 and why it's cool.
So the best answer that I can give, unfortunately, is the one that I have the least information about, because this was just rolled out days ago. But Starbucks just released a huge NFT loyalty, and it'll probably double the valuation of the company, right? Like, as though
Wow.
Starbucks needed more market share. But this is going to absolutely take them to the next level. And a few of the things, they've got it right, but a few of the things that I love about it is they've gone into this partnership with Polygon. Polygon is brilliant. They're already carbon neutral. They're moving to be carbon negative. And so they're taking all the stigmas out of the industry, right? Gas prices are high. No, they're not. The low times are long. No, they're not. Well, it's bad for the environment. No, it's not, right? All of a sudden. And there are actually ways to buy carbon credits on the blockchain to offset any carbon footprint as well. And so these companies that are forward thinking like that, I think it's going to translate into every area of their business as well. But the customers are going to feel more like they're part of something cool. There's customers are going to be getting bigger discounts and more stuff for free and have more fun with the brand. And on the other side, it's going to allow the brand Starbucks to get to know their customers so much better, right? And so,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, different category of understanding and being able to engage with and and build community with their customer base on an individual level. So again, I think Nike's doing a lot right. There are a lot of companies. Frankly, I think Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy is about to announce some pretty cool big things. But for right now, not only because of it being on Polygon, but because of how they've done it, this new Starbucks play, I think, is purely genius.
Wow. And then I heard a little bit about what's happening at Nike. Do you know much about what's going on there?
Well, what I do know is that they've now surpassed everyone else, including, Yuga Labs Bored Ape is the number one highest grossing NFT play in the world. So people are really embracing it. What I also love about Nike is they just released a new material for their shoes that's carbon neutral and eco-friendly as well. And some of it is like recycled material. So what Nike's really doing with their NFT program is they're tying the digital to the physical. They're really leveraging, sneakerheads and, exclusivity and limited drops and things like that. But again, I think they're really using these NFTs also to build loyalty and to get to know their customers even better. Other than that, I mean, I know there's been some good and bad press and thoughts around some of what they're doing. But ultimately, I think the dollars speak for themselves. I think the last time that I saw Nike's NFT division was either becoming or already was their most profitable division. And
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it's the numbers are astronomical. I'd have to Google it. It's early in the morning here, and so maybe I'm foggy, but if I'm not mistaken, they're at like 10 billion in NFT sales or something. And they just went out on this fairly recently, right? They haven't been at this for years and years either. So there's, as they say, the proof is in the pudding.
Wow. Very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Didn't know much about that at all. Do you know anything about Stephen Bartlett's company, Third Web?
I don't.
Stephen Bartlett. You don't? Ah, okay. That's no worries. I was just honestly curious.
I know the name Stephen Bartlett, but did you say the company's called The Web?
Third Web.
Third Web.
Yeah. So it's a Web3 company.
That's ringing a bell. I'm going to claim brain fog on this one too then, but absolutely, yeah. Third Web. I'm not connecting the dots yet, but it is a familiar name. I don't know if I've just seen them tagged or read something about them.
Yeah. I was just very curious about, he's providing a company that apparently is a platform for other Web3 endeavors, so his company will actually and again, I don't really understand all the nuts and bolts of it, but his company will provide a platform so that another company could accelerate its, progression into Web3 and beyond. So anyway, we can leave that one because I don't think I know enough about it.
Quick question. Do you have a relationship with him, or do you have an interest in promoting Third Web?
No interest in that. I was genuinely curious because I look up to him. I mean, he's done so well. He's still in his 20s. He's the guy behind Social Chain, And I mean, what he's done with his first agency and the money that he's made, and now he's gone into Web3. So I just think it's a great success story all around, you know? So I was just genuinely interested.
Well, and I wish him all the success as well, because this is truly a collaborative industry. But I will mention a company. I'm with two companies right now as an executive and shareholder. One of the two is called Agora World, because we've just launched, we just came out of shadow mode. We are exactly what Canva did for graphic design, but for the metaverse. So we are no code, drag and drop, free to play around with. Right now, our pricing model is if you need more storage or more people, we're $10 a month, right? If anybody listening to this needs that and can't afford the $10 a month, first of all, I want you to go figure out how to make some more money. But second of all, I'll pay your $10 a month, right? I mean, we're only doing that because it's the right model. But so basically, for free, without having to code, you can build anything from a stadium to an office building to an online shopping mall in Web3 right now. Anyone listening to this, period. Our website's agoravr.world. I encourage anybody to go check it out. But so it sounds like Third Web might be doing something similar. We're chain agnostic, we're token agnostic, right? You don't need to buy any real estate with us. We're really trying to go about this the way Google did, you know, basically with the internet. We want anybody to be able to build anything they want on Web3 in the metaverse, deploy it as they want, monetize it as they want. So I'll have to check out Third Web, but and I encourage anyone listening, check out Third Web. Stephen Bartlett is amazing, but also check out Agora World.
That sounds amazing. And I would imagine that the nature of this business, you know, given that you are making it such an affordable platform, you're willing to pay for a few people who can't afford $10 a month. Surely it's a heavily funded activity, right?
Right now we bootstrap. So the two original founders of the company each put some money in, and then they raised a friends and family round to bring the total raise to, you know, just over $250,000. But that's it. We haven't taken a penny of outside capital. We're about to either raise a round right now to scale, or we're in proof of concept with a couple, you know, multinational, many billion-dollar companies, and I think that those are all going well. And if so, you know, maybe we never have to raise the money. But yeah, no, it's been fun. I'm a bootstrapper. I really shy away from projects that seek or raise funding too early. You know, I think that capital should be an accelerant, not a proof of concept.
Wow, very responsible view on funding. I like that. So it sounds super exciting. So obviously, for people to be bootstrapping this, they are obviously deeply invested and they see the value in what they're producing. So this is not just some wishful project where it's a hope and how.
The two founders are both 24 years old, and they've both put you know, multiple five figures into this out of their own pocket. The one guy had been saving money since he was 13 years old, put his entire savings into this. It's we're really bullish on this. It's basically Minecraft for adults and businesses, if you want to really simplify it.
Wow. And you're part of the team, huh?
Yeah, I'm the chief growth officer. So I came in basically as their third guy, and we're going to take this to the moon and maybe even literally. We've actually built a moon. You can go to the moon in Agora World right now and have a rover and drive around. But I think, you know, I mean, every entrepreneur wants to think and say this, but I truly believe in my mind that we'll be able to onboard 1 million companies and turn this into $1 trillion. I think this becomes as big as Apple or Google, to be honest.
Wow, this is amazing. And you talked about it in this podcast, and we're going to be here supporting you all the way, watching this magic happen.
I used to go on 2-3 podcasts a day. If people Google me, they'll find hundreds of them. But let me tell you something. I haven't been on a single podcast in months, and I haven't spoken about Agora World publicly. So this is super breaking news here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we're definitely going to go look it up ourselves. And just so everyone knows, you and I didn't align on that before right now, you know? So
I wasn't even going to mention it, but when you said this Third Web and what they're doing, and it sounds amazing. Again, I wish them all the successes in the world. Maybe we can collaborate or partner with them. But that's when I couldn't hold back any longer.
That's awesome, man. So I'm glad we're the first to hear about this. We'll definitely make some noise about that. I think that's great. And of course, if there's more stuff that you want to share, even into the future, new cool stuff coming along the line, please always reach out to me, and we can always get you back to give us an update. Because I am, for some reason, very interested in the business side of this model. Like super interested in companies that are betting their main business model on Web3. Because obviously, like you said, the big companies are going to eventually do more workflows that are Web3 reliant, but to get an entire company that is built for Web3, that's pretty exciting to me. Okay, good. So I think we've learned a lot, and I think you've mentioned a whole lot of really cool stuff, really, really important stuff, and some complex stuff which you made sound very easy. What would be your parting shot to our listeners, taking into account that a lot of our listeners probably aren't as Web3 savvy as a whole bunch of other people? What would be your parting shot to us?
So I have two, and neither of them have anything to do with Web3 or even technology. And if anyone has heard me on podcasts before, this might sound a little familiar. I don't say it all the time, but I always look for this opening because I have two things that I would share with anybody that I think are absolutely transformative. And they apply to any industry, any person. And if anyone hearing this already knows this, great. And some people listening right now really need to hear both of these. The first one is, don't care what anyone else thinks about you. Period. End of story. It doesn't matter. If you have a relationship with the divine creator, care what your God thinks about you. And I don't care what you call your God, but care what your neighbors and strangers think about you only through the lens of they should think that you're a nice, honest person. Other than that, don't dress for anyone else. Don't talk for anyone else. You are not beholden to anyone else's thoughts about you. And that is beyond liberating. That is so empowering, and that's one of the secrets to every billionaire that I know. None of them gives 1/2 of an iota about what anybody cares about them at all. And the second one that I have, and I think it's just as profound, although it sounds way less, it sounds so simple, but it's so profound, and that is to love more. And, when I say that, people go, what do you mean? That's all I mean. Love yourself more, love your job more, love your customers more, love your house more, love your neighbor more, it doesn't matter, right? That's the thing. Just love more. And there's no one that's hearing me say that right now that can't love more. Not a single person. And it does start with loving yourself. It also starts with loving strangers without judgment. And it ties into gratitude and all of these things, but just love more. It cannot do you wrong.
Yeah, wow, that's beautiful, man. That wasn't the closing I was expecting from Mr. Uber Web3, but I think it's awesome, super true, super applicable, very relevant. I had my moment just listening to that, thinking, wow, there's so much of that message that I can apply for myself. So I think that's incredible. So Cory, thank you so much. You are a star as always. It is legitimately a pleasure chatting with you. And I'm not just saying that because you are kind enough to show up on our podcast. Like, you genuinely always a pleasure to chat to. Love that you're killing it. Man, don't know what else to say. I'd love to speak to you again sometime.
Well, the feeling is very mutual. Having you in my life has been amazing now for, I guess, probably closer to 2 years. I'm inspired and amazed by everything that you're doing. And so, yeah, let's catch up again anytime, and we can either do it recorded to share with the world, or we can have one where there's no flies on the wall. But it was an absolute honor and delight to be on your show, and I appreciate everyone for taking the time to listen to this today as well.